Hello, Brick Sculptors, and welcome back to Brick Sculpt. This is Chris, and today we're going to do another video talking about the 5-long plate. Now, I did a video on the 5-long plate not long ago, kind of just explaining length in general when it comes to plates, tiles, bricks, etc. And if you're looking to see that video first, I'll link it here as well as at the end. This video, we're going to talk just about the 5-long plate and its place in the LEGO world and LEGO system. So, after putting that video up, I got a lot of awesome feedback from you guys talking about what you like to do with this video, what it's good for, why it may not be necessary, but in general, I think I can agree with all you and say this piece is very, very useful. Now, we need to keep in mind when we talk about pieces, there's kind of a plotting system. And let me show you what I mean. So I made up a little chart here with an X and Y axis. And I'm going to show you what I mean. So let's go ahead and call this necessary. And this axis let's call useful. And I want to demonstrate a point here, how certain parts can be necessary but not useful. And certain parts can be useful but not necessary. And certain parts can be both necessary and useful. And certain parts can be neither necessary nor useful. And of course, this is going to be very subject to opinion. And it's also going to be subject to skill level, especially usefulness. Because as you get better and better and better as a LEGO builder, you're going to find more and more uses for all the individual LEGO pieces. So let's go ahead and plug in some easy ones. Basic system pieces like this, tiles and bricks. Now these are obviously very necessary to the system and very useful. So they're going to go up here in this top corner. The system wouldn't really work well without them. They're kind of the most essential building blocks to the system, so very necessary, very useful. On the contrary, let's talk about some pieces that are not very necessary nor very useful. And again, this is opinionated. These have taken a nickname on my Discord server of the cursed pieces, so I'm going to start referring to them as the cursed pieces. Now, if you're me, this one here is about as unuseful and unnecessary as you get in LEGO. If I could put it down here, I would. But we're going to put it right here in the corner. And 15706, also the piece featured in the November challenge. If you haven't gotten to that, go ahead and check that out. I'll link it here as well as at the end. This piece is pretty unnecessary and not very useful in my opinion. But it's slowly climbing as I do more and more videos and experiment more with it. And that's why I said the usefulness really depends on skill. So as it climbs, it's probably not going to become more necessary, but it could climb this way. We're going to put it right here for now. Let's talk about necessary but unuseful. And that would be things that are very, very specific. A few examples would be pieces like this, or this, or this. Things that help make a certain set work, but they have kind of limited uses outside of that. Now, obviously, you can think outside the box and make some really cool things out of these, but these pieces are definitely on the less useful side and the more necessary side when it comes to completing a specific build. That leaves us with one category left, and that's the useful but not necessary, which is exactly, in my opinion, where the 1x5 plate fits in. In some builds, it is necessary. It's not a 0 in necessary, but it's definitely not a 10. But I do think it's very, very useful. And a piece that works really well to demonstrate this is the jumper plate. I would say the traditional jumper plate, pretty necessary, pretty useful. I would say the 2x2 jumper plate, a little less necessary, still super useful. The 1x3 jumper plate with 2 studs, a little less necessary, but very useful. And maybe the 2x4 jumper plate, the double, a little less necessary yet, but quite useful. And so you can see how some pieces are incredibly useful, but not super necessary to the system. And again, this is all subject to your opinion and your skill level. And I would definitely say that these, to me, weren't always so useful. At one point, they would kind of fit in the middle here. And maybe even all the way over here when you're kind of a beginner and don't really know how to use them properly. So these things are all subject to change and float around the chart here. So enough said about that. Let's talk about some uses for the 1x5 plate. Now I think the biggest and most important use of this piece is for structural integrity. For example, let's say I want to attach two things, like maybe these pieces here, and you could fill in a whole galaxy of different things you want to attach on here. But let's say your build requires these hooks to face outward. They need to be connected specifically with a one stud gap. I think this is the most useful application of this piece. You can connect these just like this, incredibly structurally sound, and has that one stud gap. So if you're doing something like this, or whatever it may be, you can still fit that in there. Now, very useful. In this application, pretty necessary. So let's say we try to do it with a 1x3, which previous to the 1x5 being created, this would be what you'd have to do. Obviously, not very structurally sound. It allows it to twist and pop apart easily. Okay, you could fill in the gaps around it with 1x1s. Still prone to breaking. But before this piece came out, this would be what you'd have to do to complete this application. And in the previous video, I had asked about if a 1x5 tile would be a good idea. And a lot of people said, yeah, but not so much, because it's not structural. I would argue differently. Let's say you were attaching on top of these pieces, and this was going to be facing outward. A 1x5 tile is just as structural as a 1x5 plate if you can only attach from the top side. And perhaps your application requires top and bottom, and this is going to be the side that you see and you want it smooth. Well, you're probably going to want a 1x5 tile. Yeah, you could put a 1x3 here and two 1x1s. It's not going to look as good. It's not going to be as strong. So this is a very structural piece on top, and obviously a tile will likely look better if nothing needs to be attached to it. So I would argue against that. I do think that the 1x5 tile is eminent. I think we'll see it eventually, and I think it is going to be an incredibly useful piece. Not as useful as the plate, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have a place. Now, one final application for this piece, and one of my favorite applications, I want to explore more with this but haven't done a ton, vehicles. And specifically vehicles like this one. This vehicle doesn't look very unique in that it's just a pickup truck, but there's one really unique thing about this vehicle. It's 5 studs wide, which is incredibly challenging to build because you have to have an odd number going throughout it. They don't make 5 wide windshields, so you have to figure out how to make that work. You got 3 wide in the middle here and in the grill. But 5 wide vehicles, I think scale-wise, look really good. And if you're trying to build like this without 5 wide plates, you're going to resort to a lot of 3 wide and 2 wide combined, which is just not structurally sound compared to a 5 wide plate. And an application like this would be a good argument for why you might want bigger 5 wide pieces. So you can span the whole length of this vehicle instead of having to use multiple of these little skinny plates. But LEGO hasn't really taken to the 5 wide vehicle. This is typically only a mock thing that you see from builders. So as of now, it's not going to be a driving force for creating more of these. I don't think so. Because for most people, the 5 wide vehicle is just not something you're going to see much. But I think it is a great application. I think for city, which, you know, I'm a city builder, it looks good, it works well, and I think it really fits scale really nicely. Well, I hope you guys found this video useful. I'd love to hear from you guys, anything you have to add to this conversation. Obviously, there's a lot to talk about here. There's definitely more we could touch on. There's definitely more we can explore with this piece. I'd love to hear your applications, things you love about it, things you hate about it. And if any of this stuff made sense or didn't make sense, or you totally agree or totally disagree, let me know. Your comments are probably my favorite thing of YouTube because that's how I learn. I learn from getting your feedback. So the more you can tell me, the better. Well, that's all I got for this time. I hope you guys like this video. If you like this video, please like and subscribe because I'm going to do more just like this in the future. And we will see you next time.